Identical twins, due to their striking similarities, can sometimes become involved in crimes that highlight their unique relationship. Here are 10 notable crimes involving identical twins. Ursula Eriksson and Sabina Eriksson, born on November 3, 1967, are Swedish twin sisters who came to national attention in the United Kingdom in May 2008. Sabina Eriksson and her identical twin sister, Ursula Eriksson, were born in Sweden on November 3, 1967, and grew up in Sunne, Värmland, with an older sister and an older brother. In their youth, there was no apparent history of mental health issues or criminal convictions, and by 2000, Ursula was living in the United States while Sabina was living in Mallow, County Cork, Ireland, with her spouse and 2 children. In 2008, a baffling mystery unfolded in Britain involving Swedish twin sisters Sabina and Ursula Eriksson. While travelling from Liverpool to London, they were kicked off a bus for displaying erratic behaviour. They began walking along the highway and suddenly ran into traffic. Nearby, a crew filming the documentary series Motorway Cops caught the chaos. As they crossed the busy highway, they were hit by vehicles, severely injuring Ursula and leaving Sabina unconscious. When she eventually came to, Sabina attacked a police officer. The next day, she fatally stabbed another man named Glenn Hollinshead. Sabina ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter, arguing that she suffered from shared psychosis with her sister. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, a rare psychiatric disorder in which delusional beliefs are transmitted from one individual to another. Another possible explanation could be that the twins share the same genetic makeup and therefore exhibit the same psychiatric disorder. In this case, if one twin has schizophrenia, the other twin may have a risk of developing the same disorder. Ursula was released from the hospital after recovering and now lives in Bellevue, Washington, US. But Sabina was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment and released on parole in 2011 before returning to Sweden. Jeffrey George and Chris George, born November 11, 1980 in the United States, were American drug dealers and convicted felons. Through the largest illegal prescription drug network in the country, Wellington twin brothers Jeff and Chris George were dubbed Palm Beach County's pill mill kingpins a little over a decade ago. At their peak, Jeff and Chris George brought in over $40 million in Florida and Georgia, but of course, it was not from a legal business. Instead, they were massively contributing to the painkiller epidemic in the US. From 5 locations in Palm Beach and Broward counties, clinics owned by the George brothers pumped out 20 million doses of oxycodone nationwide during the height of their operation from 2008 to 2010, local and federal authorities said. Federal officials estimated that the pill mill operation generated more than $40 million and contributed to at least 50 overdose deaths. In 2008, the twins kicked off their illegal pill mills business, setting up clinics that dispensed dangerous medications with little regard for their clients' medical histories. When their clients began perishing, the authorities took notice. The George brothers and their family were targeted in federal and state probes for not only overprescribing the pills, but also murder for the users who died. Authorities investigated the entire George family, including their father, prominent home builder John Paul George, their mother Denise Haggerty, who hid millions in cash in her attic, and Chris's wife Deanna, a former stripper. Haggerty and Deanna George both were sentenced to 2.5 years in federal prison for wire fraud. The father wasn't charged. In 2012, Chris was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison for several charges, which was later reduced to 14 years after he testified against his former doctors. Jeff initially received 15.5 years, but his sentence was extended to 20 years for his role in a substance-related murder. Nathan and Justin Borkham, identical twins from North Carolina who at age 11 were guilty of shooting their father to death and wounding their mother and sister. In 1999, police were met with a shocking scene when they arrived at the Kittrell, North Carolina home where twins Nathan and Justin Borkham lived. Outside, one of the twins was calmly feeding his rabbit, but inside there were clear signs of violence. The twins' mother, Deborah, had discovered an assault rifle in their bedroom. When she tried to confiscate it, one of them shot her with another firearm. The gunshot alerted their father, William, and when he rushed upstairs, he was also shot. After shooting their father, the boys, whose names were not released, shot their 16-year-old sister and waited for the police to arrive. The twins' 16-year-old sister, Robin, was shot in the collarbone by one of the twins from the top of the stairs as she ran from her downstairs bedroom and tried to call 911. She staggered outside and collapsed bleeding in the porch swing. A reporter told investigators that the boys had had problems at school. Neighbours said that Mr. Borkham, a telephone company technician, was an avid hunter and fisherman, and that the boys practiced with BB guns on the family's thickly wooded lot. Twins, who did all the shooting in the rampage that killed their father and wounded their mother and sister, pleaded responsible to second-degree murder and 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon inflicting serious injury. The twins, who are being held in separate detention centres, face juvenile charges of murder and 2 counts each of assault with a deadly weapon. Originally charged with first-degree murder, the boys avoided a public trial by admitting responsibility and were found delinquent on August 2nd. They have been in detention centres since the shootings. Growing up, the twins were inseparable. David on the left and Dan on the right both worked as mechanics for the Transit Authority. But people who knew them said there was a difference. Dan was more controlling than his brother. Identical twin brothers nearly pull off the perfect crime. Heather DeWild was a 30-year-old mother of 2 when she went missing on July 24, 2003. Heather's family immediately suspected her husband, Dan DeWild, was behind Heather's disappearance. They were 2 days away from finalizing their divorce. On the day she vanished, Heather had taken her children, Jacob and Hannah, to her soon-to-be ex-husband's home to sign a check and pick up health insurance cards. Dan DeWild told Heather's worried family that she left the children with him to go shopping, but they instantly suspected that was a lie. The young kids couldn't say where their mother had gone. Heather's father, Dave Springer, was a veteran of the Denver Police Department. His instincts told him that something had happened to his daughter. He suspected Dan DeWild was involved, but he had nothing to prove it. Dan DeWild's home in Edgewater, Colorado, is the last place Heather was seen alive. Police searched the house but found no evidence of foul play. Dan's identical twin brother, David DeWild, had moved in and was helping out financially so Dan wouldn't lose his house. A week after Heather disappeared, a trained police dog identified decomposing scent in David DeWild's Suburban. Then, on August 4, 2003, police found Heather's car, a white Nissan Sentra, in the parking lot of a nearby apartment complex. The passenger's side window was left open and the car had been wiped clean. There wasn't even evidence that Heather had been in it. 1 month later, Curtis Johnson was moving dirt on a canyon road when he uncovered Heather's body. Heather had been wrapped in trash bags with a duct tape mask on her face. Her body was so decomposed, there was no way to even determine how she died. When Scott Story was elected the Jefferson County, Colorado District Attorney, the Springer family begged him to look into Heather's death. Story promised he would and set up a task force. In a surprising turn of events, David DeWild flipped on his twin brother. He showed investigators how he says Dan killed Heather in the garage. David explained they had taken efforts to leave no evidence behind, an idea they got from watching crime shows like CSI. At Dan's trial, a jury convicted him on 2 lesser counts, but they were deadlocked on the first-degree murder charge. Then, in a shocking twist, David confessed that Daniel killed Heather due to frustrations over child support and tried covering it up using tips from crime TV shows. In 2013, Daniel was sentenced to 74 years in prison, while David got 13 years for conspiracy to commit second-degree murder. Pete Bondurant, a 61-year-old Tennessee man convicted in one of Alabama's most notorious murders, was released from prison in December 26 years after he was convicted in the death of 24-year-old single mother Gwen Duggar of Ardmore. A clear motive was hard to come by for any of the vicious murders committed by Tennessee twins Pete and Pat Bondurant. At roughly £300 each, the twins made an imposing pair. According to people who knew them, they dealt every kind of drug one could imagine. They were known as generous, hard-partying guys until people started disappearing around them. The twins shared a short fuse, often erupting in violence with little provocation, according to killer siblings on Oxygen. At roughly £300 each, the twins made an imposing pair. According to people who knew them, they dealt every kind of drug one could imagine. They were known as generous, hard-partying guys until people started disappearing around them. The fraternal twins were born to good parents, both military contractors, in April 1955. Local journalist Kelly Kazek told killer siblings. They both weighed more than 250 pounds by the time they were in 7th grade and took pride in their eccentricity, classmates recalled. They got used to fighting. Pete committed the twins' first known act of serious violence. In 1975, he was living with 2 other men and 2 women in Cincinnati during a directionless phase of his life. The 2 women went out to get cigarettes one night, and when they returned, Pete answered the door with a bloody knife in his hand. "You're next," he said, according to killer siblings. The women thought Pete was joking until they pushed past him and saw one of the roommates lying on the couch bleeding profusely, and the other on the living room floor. The first man had been stabbed more than 40 times, mostly with a screwdriver, and he later died of his injuries. Neither the women nor police ever got a reason from Pete for the eruption of violence. Pete was convicted and sentenced to 25 years, but he was granted parole after 5, in part because he was an out-of-state inmate and the prison was overcrowded, according to killer siblings. After serving 5 years of a 25-year sentence for murder, Pete Bondurant was granted parole and moved in with his twin brother Pat and his wife Denise. The twins immediately began partying regularly and dealing illicit substances. In 1986, 2 individuals named Gwen Duggar and Ronnie Gaines disappeared after separate visits to the Bondurants' house. The twins reportedly boasted that the police would never find any evidence of the crimes. Just days after authorities questioned Pat's girlfriend, Terry Lynn Clark, about his alibi, she died mysteriously. Eventually, Denise came forward and revealed that the Bondurant brothers had killed all 3 victims, disposed of the evidence and forced her to help. Pete was jailed for 25 years, while Pat was handed a life sentence. A set of Fresno twins is charged with the murder of Nathan Halstead, the man who intervened. Gerald and Jared Smith didn't actually deal the final blow to Halstead, a car did that. In 2014, Tennille Alexander was walking down a street in Fresno, California, when she was approached by twin brothers Jared and Gerald Smith. The brothers demanded money from Alexander, and when she refused, they attacked her. At that moment, a man named Nathan Halstead happened to be riding his bicycle down the same street when he came upon the scene. Halstead intervened in the attack, but the Smith brothers turned their anger on him, leaving him in an unconscious state. Shortly after, an unsuspecting driver accidentally struck Halstead with their car, which ended his life. The entire incident was captured on CCTV. In 2019, a Good Samaritan was killed, and now the woman he saved tells her story of the rescue and the beating she thought would end her life. Alexander says she could see rage in Jared's eyes as she tried to walk past them, and they cut her off. "I thought I was going to die," said Tennille Alexander. "If it wasn't for that man that rolled by on that bike, I would have died." Alexander says she lost a tooth in the beating, and her neck and jaw are sometimes still sore. The video shows Nathan Halstead rolling up on a bicycle. As soon as he asked what they were doing to Alexander, the Smiths turned their attention to him, and after a flurry of punches and kicks, he was down. "If he would have never came by on that bicycle and said something, I would be in his position right now," Alexander said. "That man saved my life." One defense attorney said the Smiths don't believe they committed murder. A judge decided Wednesday afternoon there's enough evidence to put them on trial for that crime. The Smith twins were sentenced to 12 years in prison. In 2006, Dante Hall's girlfriend, Angel Glenn, called him from a house party in Eustis, Florida, where she was hired to work. Glenn told Dante that the location was filled with valuables, which led him to gather his twin brother, Dante, and some friends to hold up the place. After arriving, they encountered resistance from some partygoers. As a result, the gang opened fire, causing the deaths of Bernard Blunt and Keeson Evans. Identical twin brothers Dante and Dante Hall have more in common than just their genetics. According to testimony, Angel Glenn, Hall's girlfriend, was hired as a stripper to perform at the September 9, 2006 party. She alerted Hall about the party. Hall and his twin brother Dante Hall, both of Orlando, along with two other masked men, burst into the party, robbed the partygoers, and opened fire on those they believed were being reluctant in giving up their money. Dante Hall was sentenced to life. Glenn, who testified against the brothers, was given 10 years. The two other intruders were never identified. In September 2001, police arrived at a residence in Cannon City, Colorado, after a call came in that a dog was shot. Twin brothers Joel and Michael Stovall were arrested at the scene. On the way to the station, Michael managed to slip out of his handcuffs, take out a hidden firearm, and fatally shoot Deputy Jason Schwartz, causing the vehicle to crash. The twins then walked to a nearby trailer where they had stashed weapons and armed themselves for what became an intense 24-hour chase by the police. This left one officer injured and another permanently paralyzed. Michael Stovall and his twin brother Joel, then 24, were convicted of the September 28, 2001, murder of Fremont County Sheriff Deputy Jason Schwartz, 26, as well as the attempted murder of Florence Police Corporal Toby Bethel and 17 other officers. The court finds and concludes that the defendant fails to raise any of the recognized exceptions, therefore, the defendant's pending petition is dismissed. In January 2012, the Colorado Court of Appeals upheld the conviction for Joel Stovall, now 43, who also had claimed in 2009 that he had ineffective assistance from his attorneys. Joel Stovall remains in prison at Sterling Correctional Facility. Eventually, the Stovall siblings were arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 896 years. Whitehead twin sisters were raised by their great-grandmother. However, in 2007, their mother, Nikki Whitehead, was granted custody of them. This caused a huge friction as they didn't want to live with her. Things occasionally got so bad that police had to intervene, and custody was briefly returned to their great-grandmother. In 2010, shortly after Whitehead regained custody, she was found dead in the bathroom of her home in Conyers, Georgia. At first, the twins claimed they discovered her and had no idea what happened. But the ensuing investigation uncovered a bite mark Tasmia had sustained from Whitehead, likely during a struggle. The twins have been held in custody since their May 2010 arrest. Because of their age, they were first held in separate youth detention centres. On their 17th birthday, they were transported to separate county jail facilities where they currently remain. The twins initially pleaded not guilty, but later changed their pleas and each received 30-year sentences. Ronald Ronnie Cray, October 24th, 1933 to March 20th, 1995, and Reginald Reggie Cray, October 24th, 1933 to October 1st, 2000, were English organised crime figures and identical twin brothers from Haggerston who were prominent from the late 1950s until their arrest in 1968. Their gang, known as the Firm, was based in Bethnal Green, where the Cray twins lived. They were involved in murder, armed robbery, arson, protection rackets, gambling and assaults. At their peak in the 1960s, they gained a certain measure of celebrity status by mixing with prominent members of London society, being photographed by David Bailey and interviewed on television. On the surface, Ronnie and Reggie Kray were famous London nightclub owners in the 60s who regularly brushed shoulders with celebrities. But behind the glamour, they were the masterminds behind a gang called The Firm. In 1968, after years of investigation, the Krays, alongside their brother Charlie and other Firm members, were arrested. They were convicted the following year of a host of crimes, including the murders of Jack McVitie and George Cornell. However, it's suspected they committed several more. Twin brothers Ronnie and Reggie Kray ran a gangland empire in London during the 1950s and 60s and were sent to prison for 30 years for murder. Television presenter Fred Dinenage has uncovered recordings from one of his visits with one of the Kray twins. Ronnie Kray spent 16 years in Broadmoor Hospital after being judged to be criminally insane and died in 1995. The Krays were arrested on May 8, 1968, and convicted in 1969 as a result of the efforts of detectives led by Detective Superintendent Leonard Nipper Red. Each was sentenced to life imprisonment. Ronnie, upon being certified insane, was committed to Broadmoor Hospital in 1979 and remained there until his death on March 17, 1995, from a heart attack. Reggie was released from prison on compassionate grounds in August 2000, 5 weeks before he died of cancer. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more Just for Stories updates.